Well, I think I'm probably unemployable, so I've always had to do my own thing. And when I was teaching architecture, which I did, I always used to spot those guys who were the most creative ones. And I used to say, I think you're unemployable. And to begin with, they were really insulted. And then they realized what I meant is that they had so many ideas of their own, they needed to go away and do it themselves. And I think, so I'm driven by making things happen. And I did work for the city council for 18 months in 1970, 71, before I was qualified. Actually got qualified while I was there. And I think I was dying to get out and do something. But it was a really good grounding. Learning about city government in a very general fashion when I was 21 or whatever I was then. But as soon as I could, I set up an architectural practice, started doing those standard things that architects do to begin with, bathroom extensions and everything, and then an opportunity came in the centre of the city to redevelop one of the most derelict areas in the centre of the city behind Colston Hall, which is where there were 18th, 19th and earlier buildings as well. And I went into partnership with another guy and we just took the risk. And I think this is what entrepreneurship is about, isn't it? We took the risk. We went into debt with an idea of converting these buildings into a central residential area, which just didn't exist in those days. The only people who lived in the centre of Bristol were caretakers in office blocks. And we worked for the Housing Association. And fortunately, because I don't know where I'd been now if that hadn't come off, fortunately that came off. And I think that attitude drove my architecture. So I've always been a campaigning architect. You know, I felt very passionately that we had to rescue this area. It was another thing that embedded me in Bristol. I mean, I was at university in Bristol, but I was fascinated by the place. When I was at university, I was campaigning against bad plans for Bristol while I was still at university. So my entrepreneurship is about place changing. When I started the brewery, I suppose that followed my purchase of the old Will's Tobacco Factory, which is now known as the Tobacco Factory, which I set up a theatre and cafe bar and other things in. That was all about placemaking. And then I had the opportunity to buy, I mean, these are all for nothing, you know, I tended to, I've made all my best decisions during recessions, starting my actual architectural practice during recession, bought the tobacco factory during a recession, and then I bought this old brewery, again for virtually a few quid. Thought, well, it's an old brewery, let's start a brewery, and I could sell the beer in my cafe bar, and so I started the Bristol Beer Factory. Again, in difficult times, it's taken probably 7 years to turn it into profit, but what we concentrated on was producing the best craft beer that anybody produces, and we won loads and loads of awards for it. But so I've never been in anything for money itself. I've only been in it to get the satisfaction of doing something really interesting. I'm sure there are other people who do it better, but and so I suppose the ultimate bit of entrepreneurship is to take on a city and try and make that a better place. Well, I was a Liberal councillor, old Liberal, you know, almost sort of Joe Grimond days, in the 1970s. And I did that as a natural progression to my campaigning for a better Bristol, campaigning against highways, the urban highways destroying the place and that sort of thing. But funnily enough, although I stood as a Liberal, I didn't join the Liberal Party until long after I'd been elected, when some bright person pointed out that I hadn't joined. So I joined, but I was always independent in the Liberal Party in those days. There was no sort of control. I think there's relatively, relative to the other parties, it's pretty liberal. And so I've always thought of myself as an independent. I ploughed my own furrow, and I actually, during that time, got fed up with the domination of party politics on decision making. And it was very much, you'd vote one way if you were Labour, the other way if you were Tory, and possibly another way if you were Liberal in those days. And so when I recognised the need for parties in our national politics, and it's driven by that, it would be very difficult to run national politics just with independents. It was only in the 60s, in the time I came to Bristol, that national party politics started to dominate local politics. There hasn't been an independent in Bristol since that time. In fact, I don't think there's been a true independent in Bristol, apart from me mistakenly not joining the Liberal Party. Since the war there was a Citizen Party, which was really a Tory party. And so I felt that the mayoral opportunity was a great one for Bristol, but it was only a great one if it went to somebody who was free of those party strings, who wasn't controlled from either their local party or from Westminster. And that was a strong basis of my campaign. And the irony is, actually, that the Labour Party, who I accused of being most controlling during that election, partly because they were my main competition. I mean, it was only going to be the Labour Party winning that election for me by chance, and it ended up by me being by chance. I did say that a Labour mayor would be controlled from the centre. As it happens, when I sought to get Labour members on my cabinet, which I did, I wanted half my cabinet to be Labour because they won by far the most of any party in the election. There was dithering about whether they would or wouldn't. So they decided locally they would, and then nationally the rug was pulled from underneath their feet. They were controlled from the centre, and I think that is bad for local politics, and it's bad for a city. A city needs to be in control of its own future, and I have a direct relationship with the electorate of Bristol. The only people I am answerable to are the citizens of Bristol, and that is enormously valuable. So it was of no difficulty to me at all to take the decision to resign any party membership, which I'd not had any active political involvement since the 80s, and stand as an independent for Bristol, for the people of Bristol, putting Bristol first in every single decision. It's liberating. Well, I think, coming in a difficult financial, economic situation is a challenge. I mean, I like a challenge. I actually think if you're faced with a challenge, you will invent new ways of doing things. And Bristol has actually been quite a complacent city. I mean, it's a relatively rich city compared with others, but nevertheless it's got extremes of wealth and poverty, and that gives you a particular problem, I think. So I think the biggest challenge I've had is how I exercise what turned out in the end to be £35 million worth of cuts, while minimising the impact on the most vulnerable in the city, and trying to increase the cohesion of the city rather than splitting it apart. And so I took some early decisions to protect the most vulnerable right at the beginning, that we would take the council tax reduction scheme on the chin, so that we would continue to to subsidise those who could least afford to pay council tax. At the same time, I decided that I would put up council tax for everybody who could afford it, by what actually is the maximum of just under 2%, which is less than the rate of inflation. But if I didn't do that, I would lose even more services. So the biggest challenge is how I could make cuts through the administration, how I could make cuts through a different way of delivering services in what effectively was a 1 month. Well, I couldn't turn the world on its head in that time. I think I've made some impact in that direction, but my big decision was during that time to look at the next 3 years in a much more holistic way. So as soon as I've got this budget through, which I hope I do at the council meeting at the end of February, then the big task, I think, will be looking at Bristol's finances for the next 3 years and what we can deliver with what will be £100 million less over 3 years, and finding clever ways of doing it. And I think being entrepreneurial is helpful in that. I think an entrepreneurial attitude will enable me to look differently. I'm dogma free. It's about identifying the best people to deliver services in the most economic way. Inevitably it means some loss of jobs at the centre, which I'm sorry, but the purpose of a city council is to deliver services, and whatever way proves best. So that's the biggest challenge. How can I best present? And I'm holding a conference in May the 15th, with the question, what is local government for? Because I think too often one gets one's head buried in the day-to-day problems, and we need to ask the big questions, and that's the big question now. With less money to play with, we have to ask ourselves, what are we for? What are the priorities? Oh, big time. I think, I want to attract new business into Bristol, but most of all, I want Bristol to build new business. And the people who are going to do it are the entrepreneurs, the startups. And so I think working with the schools, the colleges, the universities, we've got two very interesting complementary universities within Bristol, I think is vitally important. So I think what I want to see is businesses that do business both outside but very much in Bristol as well. I think the most valuable businesses are those who are based in Bristol rather than those that come and just exploit the city. So people ask me, what will I do to attract inward investment? Well, I will target those businesses that are going to be devoted to Bristol, because I believe in the city. I think it's the best location outside London. In many ways, I think it's a better location than London. That's why we're here. I came to university here because I loved the fact that the university was bang in the middle of the city, and I engaged with the city immediately as an architectural student. And so I'm hoping that I will excite people about being in Bristol, doing business in Bristol, have a very open door to those who feel that they need assistance from Bristol. I can't throw money at them, but what I can do is put people in touch with people. And I'm very optimistic that Bristol is going to be the most entrepreneurial city in this country. It's going to out Manchester, who were a challenge city. We have to treat ourselves as being a challenge city, and then I think we'll succeed, but not if we think that we're the best and the most comfortable. I think we are the best, but we will lose that position if we don't pedal twice as hard. Well, I didn't actually start tweeting till I decided that I might run for mayor, and I think it's been an extraordinarily useful tool, but one mustn't fool oneself that it gets to everybody. So what's vitally important, I think, is to engage as much as I can, people to people. It's the people stupid, They make up the city. They're the people who need to understand where I'm coming from. I think to have a true understanding of a person, you've got to be face to face. So I don't in any way get carried away with social media as being the thing. I think all forms of media are vitally important to engaging with the 430,000 citizens, actually the greater Bristol, that I feel that when I'm abroad I represent, of closer to 1 million. And I'm not going to get to them all personally, but I think via radio, via the newspapers, and via social media, I can increase that range. Twitter is great in not just announcing things. I've actually announced some things via Twitter in order just to establish it quickly, because some people, politicians say things and people doubt whether they really mean it. Sometimes I think confirming something on social media gets it out of people's minds that you're just about to change your mind. Now, I do change my mind, and I think I change my mind healthily sometimes, but that is because, for instance, over the budget, I've issued a draft budget for consultation. Now, I think people are surprised that when I say it's for consultation, it is for consultation. And I have, therefore, changed some things in the budget, in the draft budget, as a result of consultation. And I will establish those changes prior to the budget, the council meeting, the big budget meeting. So I see it as a strength to change my mind on those things that it is healthy to invite people to consider, to have a view on. But there are occasions when certainty is really important. And social media actually has been a very good way of giving instant certainty to some things.